All right, good to see everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our October LinkedIn Live. Anwar Jill with Bridge Equity Education and Jill Dunchick with Jill Dunchick LLC, two education consultants, partnering up, doing the work in service of schools and students to just give schools the support that they need from our wealth of experience. And today, what we're going to work on and take a look at actually are tools for effective coaching. At this point in the year, most schools are either 2 months in or at least 1 month in, and you've kind of established a culture, set a good foundation for the rest of the school year. And now it's really thinking about how are we going to continue to improve the efficacy of our teachers and our secondary leaders to make sure students are getting what they need. So today we're going to provide a few tools on how to do that. But before we jump in, I'm just going to hand it off to Jill and go into our Echelon bird framework that we use to kind of center our work and make sure and support schools to be a very cohesive unit. So I'm going to kick it to you, Jill.
Great. And as Anwar said, we have an Echelon bird framework that we use to align all of our retreats, LinkedIn Live, and school studies. And specifically in our retreats, we do work with the energy of all five birds: the eagle eye, the owl, the cawing crow, the goose, and the duck. So if you've been in any of our trainings, you may know what all five of those are. Specifically today, we call in the energy of the crow and its role for us and the wisdom it brings to us as coaches on our team. Specifically, the first, third, and fourth bullet points on team. So we're able to, as coaches, connect the actions of the teacher to the larger purpose and name for the teachers when their actions are detracting from the larger purpose or goal, basically student achievement. We're adaptable as coaches. We see multiple solutions or multiple pathways to a solution, and in this case, helping a teacher increase student achievement, the excellence and the rigor in scholar work. And the last one that most people are really great at as teachers in terms of setting this up for their students, but they forget that they need to also set this up for adults, which is ensuring all the decisions are safe and supportive of all members of the team. So really setting up the psychological safety of the container you hold for your teachers when you're coaching them, whether you're live coaching them in an O3 meeting with them, reviewing their lesson plans or their intellectual prep, that you are responsible for that adult's learning and setting up a psychologically safe space for them to learn. So we call in those three energies of the crow today as we go over some of the tools that we use with our folks. Anything else on that one, Emma? You good enough?
Nothing else on mine. I was kind of being a participant observer as well. Thank you for that summation, connecting it to the work that we're going to do today. But yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Oh, all right, thanks. Two, and it has morphed into three of the tools that I like to use with folks, specifically the first two, the live coaching framework and the live coaching tracker. I will use heavily in August, September, and going into October. And then lesson plan or intellectual planning feedback is something that I'm now really engaging in heavily with many of my clients that are coaching teachers. So without further ado, let's take a moment to look at the live coaching framework. I don't know if you can make that bigger, Anwar, unless it could just also be my screen. So just gonna give that a second. We're just gonna let this sit here for a second. This is live coaching interventions that support the optimal zone of learning for the student and the teacher. I've created this tool based on the live coaching that I have done with folks over the last 20 plus years. Um, and just FYI, I started live coaching prior to Get Better Faster, but love what Get Better Faster has been able to bring into codifying live coaching. And so have included it in the different coaching techniques that a coach can use. When I give this to people, I ask them to look at, and you can do this now. And if you're on and feel like commenting, you can feel free to put in the chat what's something you like about what you're seeing. And then I also ask people what questions they have. But you'll see that there's 5 main techniques: nonverbal support, and it has both the intention and the action; nonverbal coaching, which is what most folks are aware of and intentionally do when they do nonverbal support. It aligns with some of the information and Get Better Faster on pages 72 to 75. Whisper support. So if you'll notice, both the nonverbal support and whisper support deal with coaches' interactions with the students, whereas nonverbal coaching is the coach's interaction with the teacher. Whisper coaching is the 4th technique, which aligns with information again on pages 72 to 75 and Get Better Faster. And then verbal coaching, which most people is where most people's heads go when we say real time coaching or live coaching. They go to the verbal takeover. And I like to just stamp for folks, there's 4 other ways of impacting the space in real time through live coaching before you get to verbal. But the verbal takeover is a very powerful tool when used well. So I'm going to let that sit on the screen for about 10 more seconds. And one key piece that I like to say to folks right now as they're going into classrooms is, if it's on fire and you need to do a verbal takeover, by all means, do a verbal takeover and reset the class. But if things are going okay, your immediate reaction should be nonverbal coaching to the teacher, whether it's a thumbs up, a smile, or energy fingers, so that you're already setting up a space for psychological safety so that the teacher knows that what they're doing, they need to keep doing. It's producing positive results in some way. And so the guidance I give to people is, when you go into that classroom in the first 3 minutes, you non-verbally support it and you non-verbally coach the teacher with positive nonverbals. The other thing I like to stamp is, if you need to do a verbal takeover to reset, when you do that, make sure at all instances you end with an academic push. You don't want to be seen as the person who just comes in and cares about how kids are sitting or how they're holding their pencils. You want to be a coach who cares about instruction. So that might look or sound like everyone's got their pencil in their hand, ready to go on number 3. I can't wait to see what details you put in about turtles. So what becomes important is the academic work of the child, and not just how they're sitting and maintaining themselves in space. Anything you would highlight on any of the 5 techniques, Anwar? Otherwise, we'll head into the next part of this document, which I think is key to all coaching.
No, I like the inclusion of focusing on solely student support, or differentiating between student support and coach support, because as a coach, at times you can go into a classroom and think like, all right, today I'm only going to deal with students as a cultural person, or I'm only going to focus on a teacher. And giving the different techniques really supports a leader to go in and say, hey, you know what, I can do all of these and go up through this the different tiers that you see here. I also like the second point that you made around making sure that you touch on the academic piece in the classroom. Because sometimes, especially newer leaders, might default to some of the culture pieces, but making sure that there's a touch on what the academics are in the classroom is a good signal for teachers. Let them know that, hey, students being compliant is important as well, but also what they're putting on their paper matters. And for students, giving them that confidence that, hey, you know what? it's very important that I focus on the quality of my academic work. So I really appreciated that second push as well. But and yeah, I'll go into the next tool. Let me make
Oh,
a
the second page of that one. Sorry, the second
second page.
page.
I'm sorry, my bad.
It's right this side down. And then this page, I often like to ask people, have you ever heard of the term eustress? EUSTRESS. And I think I've had like maybe 10 people this past year that have. Eustress is essentially good stress. It's the stress that gets us out of the bed in the morning and allows us to like actively work towards goals we have in our life and actively show up in whatever way we need to for those around us. And then I like to call people's attention to levels of distress. So most coaches notice when their folks are in a level of distress, when they're in that sort of 7 to 10 range, what I'm going to call the strain and the burnout. But most coaches don't realize that that 1 to 3 level, that bore out, which is on the left side of the bell curve, is also a level of stress where your teacher is not in the zone of optimal learning. And so, one of the key things that we do when we work together on live coaching is realizing where our teacher is and whether it's they're ready for a whisper coach or a verbal takeover. So this is just a framework that I think is important anytime you're growing teachers, and something that if you're interested in learning more about or working with more, feel free to reach out to us after this live. I'm going to do the tracker and then I'll turn it over to you. We may or may not get to my lesson prep. And then this is just a good document for either the coach to do themselves, or I also work with instructional leaders who have multiple coaches. And so this is just a great way to track where your coach's tendencies are. So a coach would fill this out for themselves. They would put their teacher's initials and then they would mark down which type of live coaching they did, and then some quick notes around how that coaching went. So it might look like teacher's initials. I non-verbally supported check, I non-verbally coached check, and then I did a verbal takeover. And I might wrote reset the students and pushed misconceptions in number 4. Teacher and students responded well. And then and that's just really clear that my interaction of handling misconception that the teacher wasn't ready to do supported the rigor. And I might put a note for follow-up saying, go over misconceptions from this lesson during coaching. So this is just a great way. If you have coaches that only like to whisper coach, you can give them this form and challenge them if they've got to do a verbal takeover with 5 people. So multiple ways to manage the type of live coaching that happens in your building. 2 of my favorite tools to get live coaching off, running, and feeling positive in your school. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Let's jump over to your tools, Anwar, and then if we have time, I'll come back to IPP.
Sounds good. Just one quick question for the live coaching tracker. Would you envision this as a tool that folks could use in an instructional team meeting to kind of see where?
Absolutely. Yep. So if the coach fills it out, the coach of coaches or the leader would say, okay, pull out your trackers. How many people did verbal takeovers? How many times did it go well? How many times did it fall apart? Or any questions like that, this helps people do it, hold them accountable to doing it, and then opens the door for deeper learning
Right.
of a larger instructional coaching team.
All right. Thanks, Jill. Well, I'm going to get into a resource that I use when I'm coaching teachers. I work with a few teachers at different schools currently, and this is the agenda that I use. Very simple. And one of the reason why I made it simple is because it fits to what I need, but it really gets to the biggest part I feel of a coaching meeting, which is the PLC. And I think most of the time in a coaching meeting should be focused on how am I developing teachers? This is not just an opportunity to check and say, this is what you did, this is what you didn't do, but how am I also developing teachers and their ability to provide strong instruction? So I just go through the different pieces real quick. I always like to open it up with a icebreaker. And at the beginning of the year, I like to start with icebreaker questions that helps me get to know an individual if I haven't worked with them. But after that first month, like now, the icebreaker questions would be linked to what's going on in the classroom. Like, how did it feel when you had to go over that new unit? What did you get from looking at the student data over the course of looking at exit tickets or cool downs over the course of the week? But being strategic around the icebreaker, where one, it could build relationships, but also it could build that instructional relationship where you get the teacher to start discussing what's going on in their classrooms in addition. The second piece is open space. This is an opportunity where a teacher can just share something that's on their mind because me personally, I like to get down to business and focus on what happens. But this gives me a space where a teacher can say, hey, this is something that I'm working on. This is something that came up. This is something that I'm struggling with. So I could get some of their input. A lot of times I would give this to the teacher beforehand and they can insert it into the coaching agenda just in case we need a little bit more extra time. We can assign that later so we could make sure we get to the meat of the instructional meeting. The goal and observation review is not as long. I put 10 minutes. At times it can be a little bit shorter. The reason why for that is because a lot of the feedback would have already been provided via email or after the observation in a conversation. So this could pop up different questions that arose. Is any particular responses to feedback, any particular questions? And the next steps would also have been told in that email. So we'll look at the next steps very quickly in that last part. So the big piece that I think should be in most instructional coaching meetings is a quick PLC. I mean, there's two PLCs that I like to ensure that I get to, and I give some teacher choice based on where they're at. IPP, intellectual prep and planning, or a LASW looking at student work. And there are a lot of different tools on how to do IPP, how to do LASAW. And I added a couple tools in here that you could potentially use. But essentially, for IPP, it's read the lesson, analyze the CFS, determine the exemplars and misconceptions, and identify teacher moves in service of student learning. And then what I like to do is that one week we'll do the IPP, then the next week, we'll look at the student work from the lesson that we IPP. And in that student work, separating the student work into three different categories, determine the highest leverage misconceptions, and make a plan to address in subsequent lessons. Now, why is this important? At times, folks have their MAP tests, their iReady tests, different assessments that they provide throughout the year. But if teachers are not consistently looking at student data, it might be too late to make some adjustments and attend to the necessary instruction. So ensuring that there's a looking at student work piece with a teacher enables the coach to provide an opportunity for the teacher to look at student work as a window, right? What are the students doing? And a mirror, what am I doing and what do I need to adjust in order to make sure folks get what they need? So within this tool, I added one sample intellectual prep protocol. And this is used primarily for illustrative mathematics, but the different steps are here. Not going to go over everything, but it'll be in a resource that we provide as well. And then here's a quick looking at student work protocol that you could potentially do with a teacher. So just wanted to have these resources just in case folks like, hey, I don't have an IPP resource. Was something that I could use. But again, the focus of that coaching meeting is the IPP, the PLC, which is either IPP, LASW. And in addition, I have lesson practice here as well, where if there's a particular part of the lesson that you want to practice, but that wouldn't take 25 minutes. Then the second tool that I just want to share out is something that I found on the just search for different tools, and I thought this was a pretty solid one from Instruction Partners. And I have, it's free on Instruction Partners if you want to look that up. But again, an in-person ELA lesson study or IPP, something that you can use if you want another resource. Think of how can I create an agenda or create a PLC. This is one resource. And the thing I like about this resource is that there's some pretty strong questions that to support intellectual prep of an ELA lesson. And in addition, we also have the math execution. And again, the big part about this one I like are the strong questions that you could potentially add. So these resources you don't necessarily need to use, but if you want to pull out questions, if you're stuck and you feel like your coaching session is really focused on you just telling someone what to do, these questions can help a coach say, hey, maybe these are some particular questions I can ask to get the teacher talking and thinking about the math. So the coaching ratio isn't all on the coach. And for that, I'm gonna go back here. Let me check my slide. There we go. Anything that you would like to add, Jill, based on what I went through?
I don't know if it's a question or a statement, so I'm gonna put it out there. I think it's gonna come out as a question. Um, the the IPP and the looking at student work and then the resources you just shared, no, it's not coming out as a question. Those are essentially the coach's prep for the meeting. So should the coach be, when we say we want teachers to do their exemplar work, the coach should already know what a strong exemplar work looks like, and they should be capturing that in those resources prior? Or is this, like, I could see where a strong coach could hold it together and create some of those IPP and LASW, like fill in those resources in the moment. But a newer coach, I could see where they probably want to step back and complete that going in. Do you have, before going into a meeting? Am I on point with that, or do you have thoughts or
Yeah,
recommendations?
you're definitely on point. I'm a believer that the same thing like we ask for our teachers to do, the coach needs to do. It might look
Yep,
differently over time and differentiate between who the
yep.
teacher is, but ideally, the coach would need to come in prepared so they can properly push the teacher if the teacher has a misconception. Because I've worked with teachers that, in coming into their position, they have some work to do to master the content as well. Right? When I
Yeah,
first
and you
started,
said teachers, but you mean like the coach actually needs to master the content first.
yeah,
And
in order
yeah,
to support the
yep,
teacher's ability to master the content, right?
yep,
So I think as the coach, is you're coaching someone, but if you don't know the content, it's going to be difficult to coach. So yeah,
yep.
definitely there's some pre-work that you need to do on the coach end as well.
Yeah, I was just curious. I was like going back and forth as you were presenting it out. And so that was one of the questions I had.
Definitely. Um,
Um,
do you want to go back to your?
yeah, I think we were going to have a guest. We were going to have a principal come in and speak to y'all, but they got delayed on a flight. So we can go back to the IPP doc that I had shared.
Okay.
Um, and this is a document that is very broad, and I created it um, in a way as a starting point for all the coaches that I work with. And in similar to the last two documents that Anwar shared with us, this document, when we create the psychological safety and the space for adult learning, most of us do live coaching with our teachers. Most of us do some kind of professional development. Most of us hold one-on-one meetings. And so in those one-on-one meetings, we can look at the live coaching that we did. We can look at the execution of the lesson. And then the last two that Amber said, we can also look at the lesson prep that the teacher did, or we could look at exit tickets or student work. And so this document in particular helps that third kind of meeting, which is I'm about to go in and have a 103 or a one-on-one meeting with a teacher, and I have reviewed either their lesson plan or their intellectual prep document or their exemplar. So this document has three different tools on it. As a coach, you only need to pick one. If you picked all three, you would be overkill on a lesson. What I've been finding, most of my people like the IPP section. So if you were to fill this out. You just kind of put the teacher's name, the day or the week, what content it is, and then your name or initials. And then you would pick one of the three, either IPP, lesson plan, or exemplar. And then you can see the first section is, thanks, Kari, I think I'm saying that right. You can see the lesson plan doc. And if you could just get the first block on there, Anwar, that would be great. I think it's slide up. Yep, there we go. Go down a little bit. Other way a little bit. There you go. That's the, so if you, oh, you were there. Other way. A little bit more. Other one, the one on top of it. There it is, right there. So if you want to give lesson plan feedback, this would be where you, if your teachers are creating their own lessons, I would recommend using this. So they don't have any scripts, they don't have anything. I would recommend using this. I like people to just use the yes or no. Yes, it's present. No, it's not. Some people are I am very comfortable in numbers usually, but for this, I think it's just enough to tell a teacher if it's there or not. And then I like for folks to either do a P for praise, S for suggested change, R for required change. And that'll be what I use in the notes throughout. A suggested change might be in your independent practice. I noticed you did a turn on talk on number 2. Be sure to stamp whatever key concept. A required change might be, I've noticed you've done all your turn and talks on lower level questioning. Please change 2 turn and talks in your independent practice or in your guided practice to either these numbers or to create questions of higher level. And then you'd pull in a depth of knowledge or a Bloom's chart. So that's the lesson plan piece. Can you head down to the next one, which is the intellectual prep feedback? So this is, again, the coach is filling this out after reviewing the document that the teachers sent in. And so for the curriculum that has already scripted lessons or has all of the examples and the teachers aren't coming up with this, I find that coaches tell their teachers to internalize their lesson in the way that some teachers tell their kids to annotate. So some teachers say, annotate this text, but they don't break down, underline the main characters, circle the words you don't know. So what this rubric does is gives teachers very specific things to show that they're intellectually prepping. Have they annotated each core component of the IP in the IPP doc? Do we see scaffolded questions typed in or commented on the side to the lesson script that they've already been given? Did they list at least 2 ways the students can demonstrate mastery? And that has the teacher solved and answered at least 2 higher level questions and scripted 2 questions that show that they are attempting to mitigate misconceptions? Again, when I presented this doc, I said it's very basic. I was working with the team this morning, and under other, they took out other and put teacher has determined extension lessons for accelerated students, and teacher has determined extension lessons for remediation. So I have a framework, but I think you need to change it based on content and based on what else is important to you. The last thing is just an exemplar review. And so it's probably not all going to fit on there. It's very similar in content to the IPP review. Some folks just require that their teachers do exemplars as prep for the lesson. And so you'll see, again, same setup, similar setup. Again, rate it 1 to 5, yes or no, and then praise suggested required changes. This would be, again, the coach's analysis of the teacher's prep work. And from here, most of my coaches are going into scripting the scaffolded questions and alignment of standards right now. And that's what they're actually practicing in their O3 meeting. So you pull something from this to design your O3 meeting. And I also have schools, last point on this, that will do teacher exemplar just for math. And then they're doing the IPP for ELA. So you can select the ones that work for you and subject. I think we just barely kept time. I love these resources, so I always go over. Sorry, y'all. Um, if you liked any of the resources we shared, or you think any of these resources could benefit you, definitely reach out. We do use some of these resources in our upcoming school study. And so if you want to practice with any of these resources, signing up for Nashville on the 29th would be a great idea, um, to work with us and to play with or have fun with these tools. We have two other lives coming up. One will be focused in on an HR component of getting your team ready for your mid-year conversations. And the other one, I think, is about getting folks ready for parent conferences, ending out your first quarter strong. I think I have those two right. And
Mhm.
then you want to take the last one. Sorry, Amber, I'm on a roll.
Oh, no, it's all good. To comment on the road that you're on, I like that last resource and the way that it differentiates to support where different schools are at, right? Some schools have internally created materials or teach created materials, especially in science and social studies. Some schools have, high quality curriculum materials that they purchase from expeditionary learning, illustrative mathematics, etc. But that tool really gives support to leaders on how can I provide feedback in the different ways that teachers are getting material to students. So I just wanted to shout you out on that resource.
Thanks.
And then for lastly, we spoke about the LinkedIn Lives of School study coming up in Nashville. Have about 5 spots left. So if you're interested, please reach out to us, let us know. And then our winter leadership retreats, we have some coming up. Had a great summer. All the schools that we worked with are off to a much improved start than the previous year. If you're interested in getting some support on finishing the school year out strong or thinking about what you're going to do in 24, 25, please reach out to us for our winter 24 leadership retreats. And on that end, anything else to add, Jill?
Nope, we will see you guys on the second. And thank you all for joining in today.
All right, take care. Have a good day.